Hey kids, welcome back to reading. In reading today, we're going to go back and reread Martin Luther King Jr. Before we read, we're going to talk about the power words in our book, and then we're going to talk about the author's purpose. Let's check out the first power word. Our first power word is believe. Can you say it with me? Believe. When you believe something, you think it's true. For example, I believe people should be nice to each other. Our next power word is law. Say it with me. Law. A law is a rule that all people must follow. For example, there is a law that you must wear your seatbelt when you are in the car. Our last power word is refuse. Say it with me. Refuse. If you refuse to do something, you will not do it. For example, this puppy is refusing to eat his dinner. Wow, those were sure some cool words. Now that we talked about our power words, we need to talk about why we're rereading the book today. In today's lesson, you're going to learn to identify the author's purpose for writing the book. Repeat after me. I can identify the author's purpose. Let's say it all together. I can identify the author's purpose. Great job. Well, in order to identify the purpose for writing, we need to know the 3 main reasons authors write a book. Let's review. Remember, every author has a purpose or a reason for writing a text. The author usually has one of these 3 reasons. They might want to persuade you. Maybe they're writing to inform. Or they might be writing to entertain. For example, when we read Take Me Out to the Yaku, the author had 2 purposes for writing. They wanted to entertain you with a story that was fun, but they also wanted to inform you so you could learn about baseball in America and in Japan. While we are reading today, I want you to be thinking about why our author wrote our book. Did they write to persuade, inform, or entertain? Let's get reading. Today, people of all races celebrate Martin Luther King Jr. Day. But when Dr. King was a boy, he couldn't even go to the same school as white children. He couldn't play in the same parks or eat in the same restaurants. Look at the pictures. How do you think Martin Luther King Jr. feels? I agree. He looks sad or maybe upset. It kind of looks like he feels left out. He couldn't drink at the same water fountain as white people. But his mother always told him, ML, don't you ever forget that you are just as good as anybody. Why does Martin's mother tell him you are just as good as anybody? You're right, she wants him to know he's just as good as children with white skin. Young Martin believed that. He believed it so much, he grew up to teach that message to the world. Dr. King said, "You are just as good as anybody," and many people believed him. What is happening in this picture? It looks like Dr. King is speaking to a big group of people. What was his message? You're right. It was that you're just as good as anybody, just like his mother told him. What does that mean? He's telling black people they are just as good as white people. Black people sat quietly at lunch counters just to show that they belonged there. They refused to ride buses that made black people sit in the back. They walked alone into schools to prove that Black children had a right to learn besides white children. And because so many people believed Dr. King, at last they changed this country's laws. What happened because of Dr. King's message? You're right, the country's laws were changed. Children of all races now learn at the same schools. They play in the same parks. They sit wherever they like on buses. They eat in the same restaurants. They drink at the same water fountains. Because of Martin Luther King Jr., children of all races now walk together as sisters and brothers. Wow, thanks to Dr. King, children of all races go to the same schools, play at the same parks, eat at the same restaurants, and drink from the same water fountains. All right, friends, now it's time for us to check back in and decide what the author's purpose was. Do you think the purpose was to entertain, to inform, or to persuade? If you said to inform, give me a high five. You're right. This book was to inform. I know I learned at least 2 things from it. The first thing was the history of Martin Luther King. But I also learned how important it is to know that children and people of all races are just as important as one another.